on NewsX World. On that note, let's take a look at the headlines this hour. US and Russia have found no compromise on the key issue of territorial concessions amid talks in Moscow. Meanwhile, Kremlin has stated that talks with the United States are useful, but a lot of work is left ahead in the path to peace. Russian President Vladimir Putin is all set to visit India from the 4th of December, that is tomorrow, to the 5th for the 23rd India-Russia Annual Summit. Talks are likely to focus on defense cooperation and the civil nuclear sector. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has stated that unlimited support for Ukraine is unrealistic, stressing for measured assistance. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump has added that the US will continue sending weapons if Europe contributes. US Secretary of War Pete Hegseth has stated that the United States has only just begun targeting alleged drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean, defending strikes amid criticism. Pentagon has insisted that operations are legal under US and international law. Amid Donald Trump's immigration crackdown, he has stated that he does not want Somali immigrants in the country. His comments come as authorities are planning an enforcement operation in Minnesota's Somali community. The Taliban government in Afghanistan has rejected any links to the National Guard shooting that has claimed one life and wounded another soldier. The suspect is an Afghan national. The ADP employment report has showcased that US private payrolls unexpectedly declined in November. Private employment decreased by 32,000 jobs after an upwardly revised 47,000 increase in October. US President Donald Trump has stated that he would be announcing his choice to succeed Jerome Powell ahead of the Federal Reserve early next year, further teasing out a months-long audition process. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. The Kremlin is signaling cautious optimism over ongoing contacts with the US regarding peace talks as far as the war is concerned. Senior Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov has stated that recent developments on the battlefield have had a quote-unquote positive effect on the current negotiating track, and that conversations with representatives of US President Donald Trump, that is Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, have been very positive. Ushakov has also emphasized that Washington has confirmed its willingness to consider Russia's key proposals, including concerns raised during discussions about possible Ukrainian membership in NATO, although he declined to give any further details on the topic. Ushakov has also noted that Russia currently has no contact with European countries regarding the issue of frozen Russian assets, but has stressed that Moscow remains open to dialogue. Joining us on the broadcast is Ms. Alison Butler, former Associated Press Bureau Chief in Romania. Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. We have, of course, been tracking all of these developments very, very closely. There has been no compromise. Both sides have not really seen eye to eye, even after the 5-hour-long talks that were held in Moscow yesterday. But it does seem that the Kremlin is keeping the door open. It's stated that a lot of work is still left to be done, but what's transpired could be considered a first step towards that. In your assessment, what are the key sticking points that have cropped up?
Well, first of all, I think Russia can't afford to alienate Europe and NATO any more than it already has, although we had Vladimir Putin say he was ready for war with Europe yesterday. There's a lot of sticking points over territory, over NATO. Russia is never going to agree to NATO being allowed, not even to become a member, but to be allowed to become a member of NATO, because Russia doesn't consider Ukraine to be a separate state. It considers it's part of its own country. So that is a big sticking point. We also have the issues of the territory, because Russia is making a big noise. It's banging its drum saying, we've conquered this, we are occupying this, we've done this, and it's really helping us in our diplomacy. But while it's clear there has been fierce fighting in those eastern regions, particularly around Pokrovsk, we haven't got any independent confirmation that Russia's actions match their words. They are clearly overstating their case to get advantage at the negotiating table. That's clear. Ukraine has acknowledged that Russians have made some gains, but they haven't made the gains they said they have. But Russia is trying to appear much stronger militarily than it actually is to gain an advantage with the Americans, because they need the Americans' ear. They have it to a certain extent. They think the Americans is their way to getting their way, to getting their maximalist demands. But there's a lot of sticking points, and we're a long way from peace.
Absolutely. The fact that, some analysts are claiming that Russia is bluffing in order to gain an edge as far as the negotiations are concerned.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, we're seeing a lot of kinetic action on the ground. Russia has practically been launching drones every single day, numbers amounting as high as 500 per day. Ukraine has been hitting back as well. What do you make of the kinetic action that has also escalated at the same time as these negotiations are underway?
Yes, I think it's deliberate. Russia is definitely stepping up its offensive, its military action against Ukraine, and striking not just places that it wants to occupy, but also like Kiev. It's straying into NATO members. It's showing it's forceful. It's showing it is a military powerhouse, and it's doing it deliberately to get an advantage at the negotiation table. But as you said, they are bluffing as well. I think on the ground they're not doing half as well, or even, I don't know, as they pretend they are. But they're making a big noise about it. Drones are easy. You just send drones in and you just bomb everything. That's all you attack everything. That's one thing. But they're a bit indiscriminate. I mean, they're hitting these residential areas, they're hitting other areas, they're missing places, they're being countered by the Ukrainian defense. But it's big and noisy. But the actual gains on the ground, they're not at all doing as well as they hoped, and it's taken them a very, very, very long time. But they are. I shouldn't say this in war, but they are trying very hard. But they're not as good as military action as they are at their hybrid war, in my opinion.
All right, ma'am, I request you to stay on with us. We're tracking some further updates as far as the war is concerned, particularly Europe's reaction to it. In Brussels, we're learning that NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has reiterated that all allies are committed to facing the Russian threat and continue support for Ukraine. Rutte has emphasized that Russia will remain a significant long-term threat to Europe, regardless of any potential peace agreement. He's reiterated the alliance's ongoing commitment to supporting Ukraine with weapons and aid to help it defend itself and ensure that it can negotiate any future peace from a position of strength. Still with us on the broadcast is Ms. Alison Mutler. I'd also like to, in fact, on that note, speaking of Europe, touch upon the issue of frozen assets. We've seen Belgium demanding that other EU countries guarantee to cover all legal costs arising from Russian lawsuits. It also wants them to guarantee they would help provide money quickly to pay Russia back. If a court ever ruled Moscow must be refunded. Thirdly, Belgium has also demanded that other countries holding Russian frozen assets make those funds available to Ukraine. In fact, Belgian Foreign Minister Maxime Prévost has stated that Belgium's concerns on the use of these assets to fund Ukraine have not been addressed by the European Commission's proposals. This, of course, comes as yesterday we heard Dmitry Peskov, Kremlin spokesperson, during a very lengthy press briefing, claimed that what the EU is doing is practically stealing Russian money. What do you make of Belgium's concerns to sort of split the accountability if there is any court ruling that favors Russia?
Well, Belgium is a developed democracy, and they have the rule of law. And they're very concerned that we're not just talking about large funds, we're talking about a very volatile political situation. So they don't want, if Europe, the European Union, European Commission decides to disperse these funds to help Ukraine's war effort, they don't want the blame to come on them, because they will, at the end of the day, they'll be responsible because the funds are held in their country. by one of their agencies, so that they don't want the blame to come on them. They want other countries to take responsibility, and they've been very cautious about this and very reluctant from the moment this was started to be discussed a few months ago. And there is a lot of talk about this. I mean, even Russia has addressed it now. But this is Russian money, and an international. I think an international court should decide how these funds should be used. It's all very well for the EU to do it, but those funds are held in Belgium. So at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, Belgium will be responsible, and they really don't want to be. They are a law-abiding, a solid democracy, the rule of law. They're financially transparent. They don't want a big international issue within their borders.
At the same time, we've also seen statements by the likes of US Secretary of State Marco Rubio stating that unlimited support for Ukraine is quote-unquote unrealistic. US President Donald Trump has added that the US will continue sending weapons to Ukraine if Europe contributes as well. So on one hand, we're seeing all of these statements that the leaders in US are making, and on the other hand, if I may be frank, Europe has not really been taken into confidence because it's not directly on the negotiating table itself. There are meetings taking place on the side, but the involvement as far as the talks are concerned, it's largely between US and Russia and intermittently Ukraine. What do you make of this game that the US is playing?
Well, the US, ever since Donald Trump came back into office, and also his last time, wants Europe to step up and to pay for its security, for its defense. And we've now got this new figure of 5% that NATO obliges its members to spend 5% of their GDP on defense, which to some European countries, or some NATO members, seems a lot of money. But then if you look at Russia is spending 40% of their GDP on defense, it's not that much. But I suppose Russia is waging a full-out war. But the US sees, I think, Europe as a sideshow, although it can't ignore Europe because Europe is geographically linked to Russia and Ukraine. But it also is sick and tired, to be honest, of shouldering most of the expenses for military. So it has got Europe to up its spending, and Europe is behaving, I wouldn't say deferentially, but very respectfully towards Donald Trump. I think Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, was asked today, who has a say in these peace talks. He said the only person who can break the impasse is Donald Trump. Donald Trump has the cards, as he likes. He's interested in cards. He has the cards. He has Putin's ear. He has Zelensky's ear. He is the one who wields the power over these peace talks. That's for sure. And he is using that power to sideline Europe because he wants also, this is a business transaction for him, and he and Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, they want to make money from mineral resources. Yes. And they don't want Europe to be part of that. So it's partly business, it's partly personal glory, and it's partly just solving this 4-year-old war, which it really irritates Trump beyond measure, and he hasn't been able to resolve like he thought he would be able to.
All right, ma'am, requesting you to stay on with us as we're shifting focus away from Europe towards the Middle East. We're now learning that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition skipped a parliamentary vote regarding US President Donald Trump's plan to end the war in Gaza. The vote proposed by opposition leader Yair Lapid was symbolic, as Netanyahu had already publicly endorsed the plan, which includes a ceasefire agreement with Hamas from the 10th of October. Only 39 lawmakers have participated, with none voting against. The non-binding vote could have embarrassed Netanyahu if coalition members who oppose aspects of the plan had voted down the same. The plan mentions Palestinian statehood, which Netanyahu opposes. Members of Netanyahu's Likud party did not take part in the vote. Tensions had already surfaced, remember, in October itself, when Trump's speech in the Knesset led to a preliminary vote calling for the annexation of the West Bank, despite Donald Trump's opposition to such a move. US Vice President J.D. Vance criticized the vote, branding it quote-unquote stupid, calling it an insult as well. In fact, let's listen into a comment that was made earlier.
The Knesset of Israel, by virtue of its sovereign authority, hereby reaffirms President Trump's 20-point plan, calls upon its neighboring states to establish regional peace with it, and expresses its gratitude to the President for his efforts.
Still with us on the broadcast is Miss Alison Butler. Interesting developments because we've seen the coalition, the leading coalition in Israel vote in favor of the annexation of the West Bank. Netanyahu decided to not take part in this vote. His party practically did not turn up for this as well, except for one member who was the crucial swing vote itself. But in light of this particular vote regarding the larger consensus that Netanyahu has publicly expressed himself standing on the dais with Donald Trump regarding his plan, do you think Trump would take kindly to this gesture?
But he will understand it. As you said, it's not a non-binding vote, but and not going to the vote is an elegant way of showing opposition. They're not showing outright opposition by voting against it. They're just saying they don't want to be drawn on the issue. And the problem with this peace plan is this 20-point peace plan is the point 19, which is recognition of Palestinian statehood, which Netanyahu and his coalition just can't agree on. Even if they agree on the other points, they can't agree on that. And more importantly, they can't be seen to agree on it, because that will alienate their supporters. So that's why they stayed away. Will it irritate Donald Trump? I'm sure it will. But that's politics. Tomorrow is another day. He may say something, he may not. Depends on what else is on his agenda today with Venezuela, Russia, problems at home. It's unclear. But yes, of course we will irritate him, because he was, considered a hero in the Middle East to some extent, however flimsy the peace deal was. And now, instead of him being crowned by this vote, it's been passed, it's non-binding, but the main coalition stayed away. So that is a bit of a snub, but it's not the worst thing that could have happened.
All right, ma'am, with that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time and, of course, sharing your analysis of what's transpiring in Europe as well as the Middle East. On that note, viewers, we're tracking some other very crucial developments from the Middle East. We're learning that Israel and Lebanon have taken a historic step by sending civilian envoys to a military committee overseeing their 2024 ceasefire. This has marked the first such meeting between officials from both countries. Remember, the US brokered ceasefire ended over a year of fighting between Israel and the Hezbollah. But violations and tensions have continued since. Lebanese President Joseph Aoun appointed former US Ambassador Simon Karim to lead Lebanon's delegation after the US conveyed Israel's agreement to include a civilian representative as well. Israel sent Gil Reich, acting director of the National Security Council. The meeting was held on the Blue Line border, which was chaired by the US and also involved military officers from Israel, Lebanon, the US, France and UN peacekeepers too. While the ceasefire remains intact in place, there are fears of escalation which persist. Both sides have been accusing each other of violations, and Hezbollah in the meantime has rejected any sort of negotiations. It's also rejected one of the key clauses of the ceasefire pact, that was disarmament. It's been attempting to regroup, because of which we've seen numerous IDF strikes take place in Lebanon. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Mark Sutherland, geopolitical expert, joining us from London. Thank you so much for taking out time and speaking to us on NewsX World. In your assessment, what sort of prompted this meeting to take place? Because so far we've seen the Lebanese side be rather hesitant to really make sure that concrete headway takes place as far as the disarmament of Hezbollah is concerned. Could the strikes in the southern suburbs of Beirut sort of spook the administration of there?
Yeah, good to be with you. Well, everyone's looking for the Lebanese government to then disarm Hezbollah. That is difficult. And that is what is needed to be, that's what's needed to happen. Hezbollah are rearming, as well as that may not be talked about publicly, but that's what's going on. Iran is then making sure that they are pumping money that needs to go and actually make Iran a better country for the Persian people, but that's another subject. But Iran is then sending money in so Hezbollah can do that. The Israeli government is extremely concerned about that, and having stood on that border a few weeks ago, I can fully understand why. Because during the war with Hamas, the Hezbollah, the occasional rockets, of course, would come in, and it then meant that, in fact, far more rockets than occasional. It then meant that they then had to evacuate a minimum of 80,000 Israeli citizens from that region. It's down to this. Hezbollah has to be disarmed. They took out one of the leaders of that a few days ago in Lebanon. They have to be disarmed. It's then the Lebanese government is then finding that difficult. This difficult relationship, when people push that and say, "We've had enough. This is what has to happen," then they end up getting threatened and having to leave the country because they are speaking sense. But Pia, there is no doubt, because the Israelis have then taken the upper hand and said, no, we're not having Hezbollah rearming. We're not putting up with this on our border. We are defending our citizens, and rockets have destroyed Israeli citizens' property, farmland, etc. And they take this profoundly seriously, because they have an enemy on their border, financed by the Iranians. Pia.
Indeed. A quick follow-up to that. How serious are the Americans? We don't just see, the US chairing this meeting. We're also seeing the involvement of France and the UN peacekeeping delegation as well. We do know that the UN has been under serious criticism from Israel in particular, because there were instances of certain UN outposts being used by Hezbollah terrorists to then fire at Israel. What do you make of all of this?
Well, the bottom line is the UN hasn't done the job. UNIFIL has not done the job that it's needed to do on that border, and then suddenly will turn a blind eye, as it's got members of Hezbollah next door to their outposts. That is all proven. That's all being talked about. France is there, but historically, from their empire. That area, that is why they then deem to think that they want to be involved. Remember, Lebanon at one point was this beautiful country, Cannes on the Mediterranean, absolutely beautiful, and then in 1975 had this dreadful civil war, and then we've had all the spillovers from that. All of these things go back, as we constantly say, with dealing with that region, which at times is complex, but it comes down to history, and we have to go back to that and work out why these things happen, exactly like with the Iranian Revolution of 1979, and then the consequences of that. We're always going back to that. But just to underline this, French are there because of historical roots. UN are there because of basically UNIFIL. There are huge questions about the lack of action and what they should have been doing on that border. And in many ways, as I've said, they've turned a blind eye to the actions of Hezbollah. And the Israeli government has called that out constantly, and called it out constantly for many years, no matter what government is then in power in Israel. Pia.
One quick follow-up once again. I'm digressing a little bit over here. We've recently seen Pope Leo XIV visiting Lebanon. He relayed his message of peace and unity in the Middle East. This was notably his first foreign tour since taking charge of the Vatican. In your assessment, what role can religious institutions, including the Vatican, then play in advocating for peace and justice? Long-term specifically?
Well, in my humble opinion, you and I need about 3 hours to go through Catholic history and how Catholic history has played out in regard to treating the Jewish people. And I referenced by the time of during the mid-60s, when they then came out with the Vatican II, and people need to go and examine that. The issue is this. Pope Leo, and as your wonderful guest Alison pointed out, in regard to the 20-point peace plan and point 19, where it's this whole thing of recognizing a Palestinian state. Well, with great respect to Pope Leo, there is already a Palestinian state. It's called Jordan. It came from Transjordan to Jordan, the second Palestinian state that was tried. It was called Gaza, where Israel withdrew in 2005, and then the people of Gaza then voted in Hamas in 2007, and then the rocket launches then attacked in earnest. That is there. That is historical fact. The Catholic Church leader, the Pope, needs to educate himself on that. If he was truly concerned about that, then he would be addressing various people that keep singing from the river to the sea, and that they want to see the demise of Israel, which has been under just over the 2 years, has had an existential threat in regard to Hamas coming over on the attack of the 7th of October, in what has gone on with Hezbollah, what has gone on with the Houthis, and then looking at the ring of fire that Iran has then been funding. I would suggest to Pope Leo that is where he needs to put his energy in, which is to persuade Iran and all these imams to not going full belt for their Mahdi, but actually to realize that Israel is there to stay, and that has to be understood and dealt with to then get peace in the area. Pia.
All right, so requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some updates, this time from the United States of America. According to the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, federal authorities have commenced a law enforcement operation in New Orleans, targeting people living in the city illegally. The action is part of the Trump administration's ongoing city-to-city immigration crackdown, which has previously focused on Los Angeles, Chicago, Washington, D.C. and Charlotte in North Carolina. Homeland Security has stated that the operation will focus on violent criminals released after arrest for offences including home invasion, armed robbery, grand theft, auto and rape. The scope of the New Orleans operation is not fully clear, but is expected to continue through the end of the year. President Trump has in fact told cabinet members that the National Guard will be deployed to New Orleans in the coming weeks. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Mark Sutherland. We've seen this tightening of control as far as immigration is concerned. Yes, illegal immigration and cracking down on illegal immigration was in fact the point in which Donald Trump campaigned. But we've also seen certain restrictions that the Trump administration has put on citizens from 19 non-European countries with regards to their green cards being processed and US citizenship as well. I wanted to understand, is this then a fallout of the tragic attack that had taken place against the National Guard personnel on Thanksgiving?
Under the Biden administration, 11 to 50 million people estimate have then come over the border, or in some people's cases, they have been observing in various parts along that border, on the southern border, 12,000 illegal immigrants a day. I haven't had time to do the maths, but then times that by 365 times 4 years, that is an awful lot of people. That's one assessment in regard to another estimated account. These have been people that have crossed over the border illegally. Now, when you talk about the appalling atrocity that happened in Washington, D.C., where someone who was then, I think it may have been employed by the CIA, then as an asset within Afghanistan, etc., then the appalling incident when that individual thought it was perfectly acceptable to then stab a poor 20-year-old young girl, 20-year-old member of the National Guard. No, it's not. It's not acceptable. We can play words. I'm not saying you're saying this, but people will play words, play games on this. Any action like this is appalling. Now, there has been cases where people who are in America illegally have then done heinous crimes. And understandable, as the people that voted for President Trump, they want a strong border and they want that dealt with. They want these people out of their country. There is a long list, sadly, of heinous crimes. Yes. When people have come into the country illegally, in regard to the case of the man that very sad who did this heinous act, I think he was there legally. At the moment, in the UK, after the withdrawal by America et al. Under the Biden administration from Afghanistan, we then discovered a few months ago that we've got 23,000 people from Afghanistan here that we didn't know anything about, people that were helping the British and forces, etc., that were out there, 23,000. That needs another debate. But the bottom line is this, is that Trump promised there is going to be a crackdown on illegal immigration in America. Where they've gone into New Orleans, it's another democratic city, another sanctuary city, maybe, like other places. The way people view this, and also within my own country as well, and other parts of Europe, we need to know who is coming into our country. We have the same problem. America had that on steroids over the last 4 years. We need to know who's coming into the country, because sadly at times they then do appalling acts and we have no idea who they are. Presently, to give you another illustration, within the UK, there's something like 40,000 people that 3-letter agencies are then tracking or following. If you multiply that kind of thing into the amount of people that have gone into America, there is no wonder that there is a concern on this, as there would be a concern in any other country in dealing with and making sure that they know who is coming into their country and then leaving their country. And the other definition of this, if you want to cause chaos within countries, this is how you would then do it in regard to illegal immigration. And we have seen all the big marches that marched up South America, these big people trains. That is what has then come out. That's been the whole purpose of it, to then cause chaos within American border.
Absolutely, sir. With that, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Sutherland, for taking out time, of course, putting that into context and perspective for our viewers. On that note, we're tracking some further updates, this time from Sudan. We're now learning that, as per reports, the Sudanese paramilitary force that besieged and then overran the El Fasher city in Darfur in late October is now systematically holding trapped residents for ransom, killing or beating those whose families cannot pay. While the number of people being held has not been confirmed, accounts suggest that large groups are being held in a cluster of villages within 80 kilometers of El Fasher. The reports of detention shows the risks faced by those who are unable to reach safely from El Fasher, which had been the final significant holdout against the RSF in the western Darfur region before its fall. Now, the capture of El Fasher after an 18-month siege was a turning point in a war that erupted from a power struggle between the army and the RSF. It has caused what the United Nations has described as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Well, viewers, due to paucity of time, this is all we have for this bulletin. More news